pleased to welcome Pam to the meeting tonight. And as we just mentioned, we've made sure there's no business to discuss, so we can just have a listen to what you've got to say and concentrate on that. We feel that we wanted to try and get as many ideas as possible ready, as Jackie's just said, for our input to the discussions around the Senedd Manifesto. So we're all ears, really. So welcome.
Thank you very much indeed, Donna. Much appreciated. Being even more Luddite, Donna, I can't, that's why you've had to do it, control my screen and my iPad. So if it's okay with you, when I just go next, somebody will hit next. So lovely. So thanks ever so much for inviting me. I really appreciate it. I know it's been a heck of a week and a heck of a few days, but I'm delighted that Chris created this opportunity to meet you all, because for me, this is all about citizens themselves being able to rise to the occasion of some of the challenges that are ahead of us and demonstrate that there's an awful lot that we can actually contribute. So basically, we're all on the same page. And it kicked off, if I just give you a little bit of background before we get into the slides. And the slides, it's not, trust me, death by PowerPoint. It's just lots of pictures and examples and a story, because this is nothing but a story about what we've been doing for the past 16 years. And basically, with the concerns, as you can see there, that we've had around climate change and everything else that, you know, flows from that around health, around food, around energy, or whatever it is. It seemed to me that the missing piece of the jigsaw here was what people could actually do themselves, rather than hang around waiting for folks who we elect to do things for us. Sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. And I just thought the voice of the people was something that we needed to do something about. And therefore, Incredible Edible was born in order to demonstrate an alternative proposition from the grassroots about how we might think about the climate from a food lens. Basically, 16 years ago, I'm in the audience in London, and Tim Lang, who's Professor of Food Policy and the like, is banging on about the state of the planet and all the other things that we know about. And heaven knows, I used to be a council leader when the Rio Earth Summit was announced, and we all thought, wait, everything's super now. They all kind of like switched on to what we need to do, and we need to think differently about the future. And Rio came and it went, Kyoto came and it went, you know, Copenhagen came and it went, Paris came and it went, Glasgow came and it went. And we're in a bit of a pickle. So I'm really pleased that 16 years ago, I got off a train, being inspired by Tim to roll up my own sleeves and do something about it in the place that I call home, and go and see my mate, Mary, sit down at the kitchen table and say, right, Mary, what do you think? Shall we demonstrate a different way of thinking about our engagement with food in this place we call home, which is Todmorden? And you can see some pictures of that on the screen now. Todmorden is a working class market town. It's in the South Pennines. It's surrounded by, you know, hills that you can't grow a right lot on, sheep that might kind of like huddle over a wall in the wind because it gets pretty windy and pretty wet. It's got all the sorts of issues that places like this all over the country have got, but it's a place I call home. So why would I want to do anything or demonstrate a proposition in anywhere that I can't get my hands on? It's the place that I call home that matters to me. So I said to Mary, right, what do you think? Shall we do something about it? And we did. And over the first 8 years, we turned it from looking like the rather grey place it was on the left to the rather green place it is on the right. And no, the sun's not shining all the time in Todmorden, but it started through people power to actually start to plant food in the heart of the community so that people could start to have a conversation between themselves about that food, the memories it brought, and the experience they might have about it. So, next, please. Referencing what I've just said, you know, this is why it began. It didn't begin because I have a passion for growing Brussels sprouts, because I don't. It began because I was deeply concerned about my family's future, about the future of families I'll never meet, about the lack of leadership that was around the place, about the real crises that we're going to see on our doorsteps. And it just struck me, you know, I used to do a lot around trees. I used to be with the Forestry Commission, and there was a saying, was there not? The best time to plant trees is 30 years ago. The next best time is now. And it was kind of that feeling of, okay, let's just do it. And let's not wait for a check. Let's not wait for a lottery bid. Let's not wait for a degree. Let's not wait for anybody's permission to try and feed our community with our own resources, with our own hands, and see where that went. So this simple idea that came to my mind on a train between London and Manchester after that conference that Tim was speaking at, it needed to have some sort of, you know, design so that everybody could start to say, okay, I get that. All right, I'll have a crack at that. That's simple. Because it's the simplicity of the story, I think, that makes Incredible Edible attractive to people. So the idea was, this is about a movement. This is about doing things for ourselves, but actually playing to our own strengths and our own gifts. So the very first thought that I had, and it is about 3 plates, because it is about using food as a Trojan horse to help people think through a different way of living in their communities within a planetary resource that is going to be more sustainable. So the first plate was community, and it was, okay, in our community, what sort of food and how much food can we actually grow in the place we call home, right in the middle of those streets where we walk up and down to take our kids to school or to the doctors, right in the middle of our housing estates, in front of our public buildings. What if we planted food all over the place in what we call propaganda gardens? Because it's not about, we could have called them guerrilla gardening, but Mary at the time didn't like the idea of guerrilla gardening because she thought it sounded too full of testosterone. So we thought, right, well, what exactly are these gardens doing? These community spaces on our high streets, in front of our college, in front of our doctor's surgery, in front of our railway station. What are they? They're propaganda gardens. They're places where suddenly what was grey appears within weeks to be green, with herbs and fruit, with trees and vegetables, just there for everyone to share. And we have signs up that says, this is food for free. We've planted it for you. Please help yourself. But if you take the last one, replant another one. These propaganda gardens started to appear all over the place. I'll give you some examples about them. And they really caught on because you didn't need to be a member of the RHS. You didn't need to have any particular, you just needed to think, what can I actually do in my window box or on my grass verge or wherever I might be? How can I start to grow food and show people what's possible to grow in our towns, in villages, in our boroughs or whatever? So these propaganda gardens started to pop up all over the place and people stopped in front of them. And some people said, oh, gosh, I'm not sure what that is. I've never seen what's a chive or what's kale. Or... So another set of people who weren't particularly keen on growing made some beautiful signs. And we'd pop those signs up next to them with a food to share sign, but also said, this is charm, or this is chive, or these are berries. And some other people said, well, we don't know when it's ready to pick because we've never done this before because nobody's taught us how to grow. So another bunch of people, because that's how communities work, isn't it? Painted the very first one was just a piece of wood with red, amber and green. And we had a sliding scale at the side of it. So when it was not ready for pick, people could see the red. When it was nearly ready to pick, people could see the amber. And when it was ready to pick, it was green. And it was all stations go. And of course, being Brits, nobody ever picks straight off, lest they be sued or shot or whatever else it might be. But when you do this year in, year out, and we've done it for 16 years, people understand what that food is. And with the second plate, they start to understand what to do with it. So this is about not seeking lottery bids for people to teach each other how to do things, but finding folks on your street who know how to grow the best tomatoes, or finding folks down the avenue who know how to pickle or bottle, or speaking to someone who works for the parks department to show you how to graft a tree. All these things that we know, do we not, in the cooperative movement, are there in terms of experience on our streets. But so rarely do we ask people to help us. And it sort of struck me very strongly when I went to do some work in Wigan, that the best growers of spuds and tomatoes were the miners. But nobody ever asked them whether they could come and show people how to do these things. And it was fantastic when we did, because we started to have conversations. And this is all about folks talking to people. The last slide is about, there has to be jobs in it, you know. If we're going to really demonstrate as people in our communities without permission and without asking anybody for resource that we are prepared to live our lives in a different way when it comes to food, and I just concentrate on food, that's the discipline. You could apply it to any number of things, but food is the universal language and cuts across age and income and culture and ability. So if we're going to demonstrate that, then what we want is to see young people being the next generation of urban farmers, or young people wanting to start small businesses or set up a market stall, or think about that there may be something that they can contribute towards a more localized food supply chain. And you'll see from some slides in a minute that actually when people walk up and down streets, avenues, you know, across estates, and they see food growing all the time in the place they call home, they are more likely to go to their local markets and ask, where do those eggs come from? And are those potatoes local, or whatever it might be? Now, this is happening more and more, but 16 years ago, it wasn't very common. So those are our 3 spinning plates about agitation, about movement, and about just people cracking on themselves in their neighborhoods, planting food, sharing food, and getting the benefits from that. Next, please. So the first slide here, there's 3 slides, and they all represent different aspects of those 3 spinning plates. And I just want to say at this point that we have no paid staff. You know, this is all run by volunteers. Sometimes somebody gives us a bit of money and we can contract somebody to do a specific piece of work. But this is real. This has been an amazing experience for me for 16 years, how to be innovative in creating outcomes that demonstrate an alternative proposition about what we believe to be a good future. So the changing spaces, that's all about community gardening. Now, it might be, down at that top right-hand one, is a really dark alley in Ulverston, where a local group, Incredible Edible Group, thought, no, well, actually, I think some beans and stuff like that will grow down that. And so they started to make some raised beds. And of course, we never go and spend a load of money on raised beds. We find somebody who knows how to make them. We talk to the men in sheds. We do all these things about who knows who's got some wood, who's any good at creating a raised bed, who knows where there's some soil, can we use your compost, and so on, how communities work. The one on the extreme left is a wonderful example in Portmadden of where Lizzie Wynne and the team of Incredible Edibles have got fantastic, I mean, the growing in Portmadden is fantastic. It's much better than Toblerone. But anyway, fantastic stuff that they're growing there. But they've also built an ecological hangout place where their own hut, made from plastic and from mud and all manner of things, because Lizzie has expertise in that area. The top one is raised beds outside an estate in Wakefield. The bottom one is people on the Isle of Bute in Scotland interpreting Incredible Edible as wanting sort of points of conversation along the front, along the seafront in Bute, so that they themselves can show what might be able to grow there, what might not be able to grow there, and start that conversation. So that's the idea. Folks actually growing vegetables in the place they call home, changing the look of the place simply by using their skills to do that. But the second plate, which is the learning plate, again, who knows what in your community? We've met some amazing people who've travelled all around the world in order to live in our communities, who really know how to grow stuff. And it's fantastic to see them leading the way and showing how they can actually grow not only stuff that we know ourselves, but vegetables and herbs that we don't know ourselves. And then we tap in, dependent on where we are. We have 150 groups all over the place. Dependent on where we are, there might be a good relationship with men in sheds, as I've explained. And that's a great relationship. Building the raised beds where there is a need for raised beds because you're not sure about the soil itself, but actually thinking about other things like lovely signage, like that traffic light system. Or there's the tool libraries. Again, not everywhere, but in many places, because folks haven't necessarily got the tools to do the business. But if we think back to Cuba and what they actually did, they set up, in essence, tool libraries all over the place so that folks could have the means of growing food for themselves. And then we've got wonderful people like Ian in the bottom left in the Northwest, who basically was a guy that taught young people in a comprehensive, and over the weekend, he started a business called Incredible Education. And he works with schools now to show them this happens all over the place. It's not unusual, but there are so many ways for folks to share their skills and upskill a community without worrying too much about whether we've got a lottery bid to do it. Last slide, please. And this is the thing. It's really simple. I'm an economist, as it happens, and there's nothing to be proud of about that at all, because kind of I've never done it since I left university. But basically, you get the money, you spend your you get the economy you spend your money on. And that might sound incredibly naive, but actually, instead of people not thinking there's an alternative to nip into the supermarket and back, and I'm not anti-supermarket, I'm pro an alternative economy. Instead of doing that and having beans flown all over the planet or whatever it is from wherever it is, what about supporting our local markets? What about actually going onto our markets and having a conversation about where the food comes from? And we did that. And what we found in year 2 and year 3 was that people who had been walking past propaganda gardens, they'd started to talk about local food. So they were going into the market and saying, where does this honey come from, or whatever. And that in turn encouraged more market traders to talk to their local farmers, to get more eggs from them, etc., etc. And in our local cafes and our local pubs, whereas before there was no emphasis whatsoever on local food, now there is, because there is a USP about it. And that localized supply chain has come from nothing other than people doing things differently. And there's some great examples, not only about community farming, but a couple of markets themselves. The one on the left is in Middlesbrough. The one on the right is in one of the districts outside Manchester, where the community themselves took over their market hall and are really building their own market economy with local food and other produce. So all that stuff that's been going on for donkey's years was all about making a statement and demonstrating the impact that ordinary folks just getting together, and you guys know this better than anybody, can make a real impact. But the bottom line is we needed 2 hands clapping, because it's absolutely brilliant for grassroots innovators to do all that change making stuff. But if we live in a framework that doesn't allow it to be easy for folks to nurture their own communities, then it's not a system that's really going to create a kind of prosperity. So what we've been trying to do is to make sure that we talk at every opportunity with the major anchors wherever we are. And we do have groups across the London boroughs. We have groups in little villages in the middle of Somerset. We have groups up on the coast in Scotland. My point is they're diverse, but they all have some contact with their anchors, and they're opening up conversations about, wouldn't it be brilliant if the NHS made sure that in all its land around its hospitals and doctors' surgeries, food was growing? The wonderful work of the NHS Forest is fantastic. But we actually had a chat with our local new health centre, and we said to them, would you mind if we planted food instead of prickly plants that nobody can eat? And they said, well, we don't mind as long as we don't have to look after it, and you do. So we said, fair enough, and that's always been the case. So now our health centre 10 years on is surrounded by strawberries and raspberries and apple trees and rhubarb, or keen on rhubarb in Toberdon, and all manner of food. And it's looked after by the community, and it's shared with the community. We did the same thing at our local college, where we have raised beds outside our college, looked after by the community, shared with the community. We even did it in front of the police station, where we actually did ask permission, because we're not completely bonkers. And we asked the police, oh, you've got some horrible concrete in front of your police station. Would you mind if we built some raised beds on it? And they said, well, we don't mind, as long as we don't have to look after it, and you do that. And we said, oh, certainly, officer, that'd be absolutely fine. So we grew sweet corn, we grew herbs, we grew all manner of things in front of the police station. And the police said themselves in years 2, 3, 4, and so on, because they're all still there, the reaction that they had as they walked past that, the conversations they have in their communities with smiles on their faces as sweet corn is growing in front of the police station, which kind of like isn't kind of native to Toberdon, obviously, or just grow taller than the police and just make us all smile when we think that we're doing it. These kind of like small gifts of community cohesion had really made a difference to the way people interact in our town. And that was all part of what we were trying to demonstrate. Next, please. Problem is, there are some institutional challenges to everybody cracking on and growing. And that is, and it's not just growing, it's also any connection with food and also their connection with nature through food. And some of these challenges are, and it comes from a piece of work that was done by Open University, so, but we all experience it in this community, but it was great that they actually captured a lot of it, is there is limited land access. Nobody quite knows where they can grow what. And it's basically, it's based around a permission-based approach. So if you've got a council that's sympathetic, that's fantastic. And if you've not, it's a thumbs down, so you can't do it. There are fragmented council policies. Where exactly does food justice lie? Ambiguous responsibilities. How come in one council, highways welcomes people growing veg on verges, and in another council, they completely stop it because they say it's not suitable for highways? Why is community growing such a low priority in so many areas? And why is there a disconnect of community growing from that wider food agenda? Why are we not working more closely together, citizen and state, to deal with some of these big issues? So that was a great piece of work. Next, please. And therefore we thought, right, well, it's about time we change some rules here, because we're never going to get anywhere within this system that we've got at the moment. It's fine for somebody who's confident like me, but if you've never had an opportunity to speak to anybody in a position of authority, the first time you get knocked back is probably the last time you're going to ask. So we need to make it easier so that we change the rules and we share the responsibility across our communities. Next, please. So this was our pitch, really. Imagine if every neighbourhood was incredible edible. Imagine if those plates were spinning everywhere. Imagine if that meant that citizens were respected partners in adapting to climate change. And imagine if we didn't have to rely on the goodwill of some councillors to grow local food on public land, but that actually we had it as a right. We had a new contract between citizen and state around the food that we can nurture ourselves with within the places we call home. So, as it happened, and this would be in 2022, we were pondering what to do. And as always happens, the serendipity of goodwill that comes forward to people who are really just trying to do something to make the world a little bit kinder than it was. These barristers in London, supported by a great organisation called Rights Community Action, produced a piece of legislation for us called the Community Right to Grow on Public Land. It was a fully fledged bill. And we thought, wouldn't it be fantastic if we could, this is 2022, get this in the Levelling Up bill? Wouldn't it be fantastic if Michael Gove said, yeah, that's a great idea, why don't we do something about it? So in a typical incredible edible way, we launched the concept of a right to grow in the House of Lords in 2022 on an absolute shoestring. And we had cross-party support. Every single party said, this is fantastic. It's a no-brainer. It was debated in the House. We got an amendment debated. It never got very far. We didn't think it was going to get very far, but it raised the possibilities that communities can be trusted when it comes to nurturing each other and their planet. And the great thing that came out of the Lords event was that local authorities started to get in contact with us and say, gosh, this is interesting. What are you doing? Next slide, please. We were contacted by communities, by local authorities. And so we kind of customized that national piece of legislation to what is the right to grow? What are the elements that we're asking? We're asking that communities have an open source, accessible list of places in their community agreed between themselves and their local authority of where they can grow food. We're asking that we move from permission, which is all about depends who's there, to a rights-based approach, because as things are going to get worse, not better, we really do need to think about citizens' rights. We need it to be as simple as possible for everybody to do this. We need free leases. We need to be uncomplicated. We don't need reams and reams of documentation to be signed. And we need authorities to prioritise community growing and to build trust. And at the end of the day, this is the biggest plus for me. If we can really build trust between citizen and state, between those elected and those they represent in a really constructive way, and if we can start to do that around food, we can start to change so many of the problems that we've got. Next, please. The benefits are obvious. Amazingly, again, Lancaster University did a great piece of work on how much food could you actually grow in an urban public realm across England. It was England they were looking at. And they did how robust is this? It's not minutely detailed, but their estimate was that you could grow up to 40% of your own fruit and vegetables from the land that is in the public realm. Now, even if you could only do a half of that, or even a quarter of that, that's a huge impact on the amount of nutritious fresh food that could be there on your doorstep. More access to fresh food, better health. Everybody on this call understands that relationship. Reduced reliance on high carbon food imports, significant cut in carbon miles around food, reducing urban hotspots, reconnecting people with nature, and more importantly than anything, actually giving people a sense of their own worth, because they are part of the solution, not the problem. So why a local right to grow? I've explained. Permission is fine, but let's look at a rights-based framework within which we can handle this. We're very clear on some of the asks, but every local authority will want to interpret that in their own circumstances, because they will be slightly different, but they all have common themes, which was the mapping, which was the give it for free, which was the use the support of the local authority to help their communities. That previous slide. The local right to grow reduces bureaucracy, paves the more for more community growing, gets people more engaged in community groups. And of course, that can eventually move on to national policies. Next, please. I think we've missed some slides, but it doesn't matter. These are some of the people that immediately said they wanted to sign up to this concept of a right to grow. We're working very closely with different members of this network and beyond all over the country. Sustain, we're working with Sustain to see if we can really get the Mayor of London to sign up to the first international city to adopt a right to grow for all its citizens. We've had some fantastic conversations in Wales, because we've got brilliant growing groups in Conway, fantastic ones in Portmaddock. We've been talking to people in Rights Community Action, which is based in Wales, about how we can contribute to your amazing vision of future generations, how this is a part of that jigsaw, what we can actually do ourselves to nurture our communities. And you can see there's an awful lot of work going on. It takes time because we have no money. But what we do know is that certainly within the cooperative movement, I have spoken to many people who really see the synergies and can see that for 16 years, we have demonstrated that this is a proposition around repurposing public realm, and that citizens are prepared to take on responsibilities when it comes to actually looking after their own spaces in their own neighbourhoods. That's it. That's incredible edible and a right to grow.
Is that the one we missed?
You can do your own. So let me get this clear. The one thing that local authorities say, and thank you, John, for that. The one thing they say is, well, it's all very difficult to open up our data sets and we can't share that. There may be commercial responsibilities. And I say, well, actually, there's loads of great examples of communities knowing their own streets. Why don't we just walk the streets with them and just agree where those spots actually are? Are they on the edges of fields? Are they in the corners of parks? Are they on grass verges that, nobody ever drives a car up and down? Where are these places? This opening up of conversations and employing community knowledge is absolutely central to the ideas of Incredible Edible. So thank you, Donna, for showing that.
Am I okay to stop sharing then now?
Yeah, go on.
That's incredibly stressful. Never mind you talking. You get the press going up and
I'm
down.
sorry.
No, that's all right. I should learn. Thank you so much for that. That's filled in a lot of gaps for me because I've heard a lot from, excuse me, about Incredible Edible from Chris mostly, and the work that he does in Wrexham up there, which is always it's always made me think I should go and have a look really, and I haven't. That's my fault. So that's filled in a lot of gaps for me. Thank you.